Why did you do that? You know what I'm talking about. It's the moment you lash out in anger over something small, completely out of proportion to the situation. It's the time you completely freeze up when you need to speak up in a meeting. Or maybe it's the heartbreakingly familiar pattern of pushing people away just as they start to get close. You tell yourself, next time will be different. You read the self-help books, you practice mindfulness. But then it happens again. The overreaction, the paralysis, the self-sabotage. And the worst part is the shame that follows. The sense that you're an adult, you're intelligent, so why can't you control yourself? You start to wonder if maybe you really are broken on some fundamental level. What if I told you that these reactions aren't a sign that you're broken? What if I told you they are actually evidence that your body is working exactly as it was designed? Imagine your mind as a state-of-the-art security system. It's designed to protect you. But what happens if that system was calibrated in a dangerous environment, and now, years later, it's still running on those old settings? It sees danger everywhere. An email from your boss isn't just an email. It's an existential threat. A date isn't just a date. It's a potential trap. Your system isn't broken. It's just running on an outdated operating system. We call this the trauma operating system. In the next 20 minutes, we're not just going to talk about what trauma is. We are going to decode how it lives in your body, how it invisibly drives your reactions, and most importantly, we're going to give you the blueprint to recalibrate that security system. Because the truth is, your past is not a life sentence. And understanding what's really going on inside your nervous system is the first step to taking back control. Welcome to Psych Blueprint. When most of us hear the word trauma, our minds immediately go to the most catastrophic events: war, natural disasters, serious accidents. We call these big T traumas. And yes, these events are certainly traumatic. But there is another form of trauma that is quieter, more insidious, and far more common. This is small t trauma. These are events that may not be life-threatening, but they threaten our sense of emotional safety. It could be growing up with a hypercritical or emotionally distant parent. It could be relentless bullying at school. It could be the sudden breakup of a significant relationship, or the experience of systemic discrimination. Here's the thing. Our brains are not very good at distinguishing between different types of threats. Whether it's a tiger charging at us or the feeling of abandonment as a child, our internal alarm system reacts in the same way. This is where the old understanding of trauma fails us. The old paradigm says that trauma is a memory. It's an event that happened in the past, and if you're strong enough, you should just get over it. We're told it's a matter of willpower, of changing our thoughts. But modern neuroscience, particularly the work of experts like Dr. Bessel van der Kolk and Dr. Stephen Porges, paints a radically different picture. This is the new paradigm. Trauma is not just a memory, it is a physiological change. It's not just in your head, it's in your entire body. Let's go back to our security system metaphor. When you experience a traumatic event, the system gets overloaded. It doesn't have time to process what's happening calmly and rationally. Instead, it kicks into emergency survival mode. And here's the crucial part. Once the threat is gone, the system doesn't always reset itself. It gets stuck on high alert. The energy that was mobilized to protect you, the muscle tension, the racing heart, the hyper-focus, remains locked in your nervous system. You are living in the present, but a part of you is still reacting as if you are in the past. This is the trauma operating system. It's a system that prioritizes survival above all else. It sacrifices connection for protection. It sacrifices curiosity for certainty. And it is exhausting, because running a security system at red alert 24/7 burns a massive amount of energy. This explains why people with a history of trauma often struggle with chronic health issues, autoimmune disorders, and mental exhaustion. So how does this system work? What controls these alarm levels? And how can an event from 20 years ago still dictate your reactions today? To understand that, we need to dive deep into the brain and the nervous system.
To understand the trauma operating system, we need to understand the hardware it's running on. Neuroscientist Paul MacLean proposed a simplified but useful model called the triune brain. At the bottom, we have the reptilian brain. This is the oldest part of the brain, responsible for basic survival functions: breathing, heart rate, body temperature. It only cares about keeping you alive right now. Above that is the mammalian brain, or the limbic system. This is your emotional center. It includes crucial structures like the amygdala, your smoke detector, and the hippocampus, your memory librarian. This part of the brain cares about connection, attachment, and emotion. Finally, at the top, we have the human brain, or the neocortex, specifically the prefrontal cortex. This is the CEO part of the brain. It's responsible for logical thinking, planning, impulse control, and self-awareness. This is the part of the brain that allows us to say, maybe that's not a snake, it's just a garden hose. In a well-functioning brain, these three parts communicate seamlessly. The prefrontal cortex can regulate the emotional signals from the limbic system and the survival impulses from the reptilian brain. But under the influence of trauma, this communication breaks down. The amygdala detects a threat and hijacks the system. It shuts down the prefrontal cortex. This is known as an amygdala hijack. And this is why you cannot think your way out of a trauma response. The part of your brain responsible for rational thought has effectively been taken offline. You are operating from pure survival mode. Furthermore, trauma also affects how memories are stored. The hippocampus, which is responsible for tagging memories with time and place, also gets disrupted. As a result, the traumatic memory is not stored as a coherent narrative about the past. Instead, it is stored as sensory fragments: images, smells, sounds, bodily sensations. When you get triggered in the present, these fragments resurface. Your brain isn't saying, "This is a memory from 1995. It's saying, "Danger, right now." This is why flashbacks feel so vivid and terrifying. So, how does our body decide the threat level? This brings us to one of the most significant breakthroughs in understanding trauma: the polyvagal theory, developed by Dr. Stephen Porges. This theory focuses on the autonomic nervous system and a key component called the vagus nerve. This is the nerve I mentioned earlier that connects the brain to most of your major organs. It's like the fiber optic cabling for your security system. Polyvagal theory identifies three main states of the nervous system, organized like a ladder. At the top of the ladder is the ventral vagal state, or social engagement. This is where we want to be. We feel safe, calm, curious, and connected. Our prefrontal cortex is online. We can love, learn, and grow. When we perceive a threat, we drop down a rung on the ladder into the sympathetic state, or mobilization. This is the fight or flight response. Our body is flooded with adrenaline and cortisol. Our heart races, our breath is shallow, our muscles tense. We are ready for action. This is anxiety, anger, panic. If the threat is too overwhelming and we cannot fight or flee, we drop to the bottom of the ladder into the dorsal vagal state, or immobilization. This is the freeze response. It is the ultimate survival mechanism. Our body shuts down to conserve energy and minimize pain. We feel numb, hopeless, depressed, and disconnected from reality. The trauma operating system locks us into these lower states on the ladder. We spend less time in social engagement and more time oscillating between mobilization and immobilization. But there's a fourth response we need to talk about, one that is often misunderstood. This is the fawn response. Fawning is when we try to please or appease the source of the threat in order to stay safe.
This is especially common in people who grew up with unstable or abusive caregivers. If you couldn't escape your family, the best way to survive was to become useful, quiet, and non-problematic. In adulthood, this manifests as chronic people-pleasing, an inability to set boundaries, and a deep sense of guilt when prioritizing one's own needs. It is a survival response disguised as niceness. Recognizing your nervous system state and your default survival response is crucial. Do you tend to fight, anger, defensiveness, flee, anxiety, overworking, freeze, dissociation, procrastination, or fawn, people-pleasing, self-neglect?
Now, when we talk about these things, it's easy to fall into a few cognitive traps. The first skepticism is often, this sounds like I'm making excuses for my bad behavior. If it's just biology, am I responsible for my actions? This is a crucial distinction. Understanding is not excusing. Understanding that your reactions are rooted in trauma does not absolve you of responsibility for the impact of your behavior on others, but it does allow you to approach yourself with compassion instead of shame. Shame is a freezing agent. It keeps you stuck. Compassion is a solvent. It allows for change. As Dr. Gabor Mate often says, your reactions are not your fault, but your healing is your responsibility. The second skepticism is, doesn't everyone who goes through something bad experience trauma? Why are some people more resilient? Resilience is complex. It's influenced by genetics, the intensity and duration of the event, the age at which it occurred, and, most importantly, the presence of a supportive, attuned relationship. Trauma is less likely to take root when we have someone to help us process it, to reassure us that we are safe. When we have to face it alone, especially as children, our nervous system is much more likely to become overwhelmed and stuck. Finally, there's the skepticism, I've never experienced anything bad enough to qualify as trauma. Remember the distinction between big T and small t trauma. You don't have to have gone to war for your nervous system to have been altered. Chronic emotional neglect can be just as damaging as overt physical abuse. If you consistently felt unsafe, unseen, or unloved as a child, your trauma operating system may well have been installed.
Let's see how this plays out in real life through the story of Alex. Alex is a talented graphic designer, 32 years old. On the outside, Alex seems successful, but internally, Alex is constantly anxious and exhausted. Alex grew up in a household where love was conditional. Alex's parents weren't monsters, but they were obsessed with achievement and highly critical. If Alex brought home a B+, they would ask why it wasn't an A. If Alex expressed sadness or anger, they were dismissed or told they were too sensitive. In that environment, Alex's developing brain learned a crucial lesson. To be safe and loved, I must be perfect and I must not have needs. Alex's security system was calibrated to detect even the slightest hint of disapproval or rejection. Alex's default survival responses became fawning and flight through overworking. Now fast forward to the present. Alex is in a performance review with their manager, who is generally supportive. The manager gives positive feedback, but then mentions one area for improvement. I'd like to see you be more confident in presenting your ideas in team meetings. To a well-regulated nervous system, this is constructive feedback. But to Alex's trauma operating system, this is an all-out assault. Alex's amygdala screams alarm, the prefrontal cortex goes offline. Alex drops down the polyvagal ladder into the sympathetic state. Their heart pounds, their palms sweat. In Alex's mind, they are no longer a competent 32-year-old adult. They are an 8-year-old child being reprimanded. Their fawn response kicks in. They start apologizing profusely, promising to do better, completely unable to absorb any of the positive feedback. After the meeting, Alex feels exhausted and ashamed.
They beat themselves up for overreacting. Why can't I just take feedback like a normal person, they wonder. But Alex isn't crazy or weak. Their security system did exactly what it was programmed to do: protect them from the rejection they learned was dangerous as a child. The impact of this is profound. The Adverse Childhood Experiences (ACE) study has shown a strong correlation between childhood trauma and a wide range of physical and mental health problems later in life, including heart disease, depression, addiction, and even cancer. The trauma operating system doesn't just affect our relationships and careers, it affects our very physiology. But here's the good news. Because trauma is physiological, it can also be healed through the physiological. We are not stuck with this operating system, we can upgrade it.
Healing trauma is not about erasing the past. It's about recalibrating the nervous system so that it recognizes you're safe in the present. It's about moving from a state of protection to a state of connection. Here is a 3-phase blueprint for upgrading your trauma operating system. This process is not linear, and it requires patience. For many, working with the trauma-informed therapist is crucial. But these strategies are powerful tools you can start using today. You can't fix a system if you don't know how it works. The first step is to become a curious observer of your own nervous system. We need to map your triggers and your responses. Triggers are not what's wrong with you, they are messengers from your past. They point to where you need healing. Here is your exercise. For the next week, practice noticing and naming. When you feel a strong shift in your emotional state, a sudden anxiety, a flash of anger, or a shutting down, pause and get curious. Ask yourself, where am I on the polyvagal ladder right now? Am I in mobilization or immobilization? Then try to identify the core survival response. Is this fight, flight, freeze, or fawn? The mere act of naming your state engages your prefrontal cortex and can reduce the intensity of the reaction. Let's go back to Alex. When Alex noticed their panic after the review meeting, instead of spiraling into shame, Alex could say, "Okay, I'm in a sympathetic state. This is my flight response being activated because I felt criticized." This simple cognitive shift is the first step to regaining control.
Once you've mapped your system, you need tools to bring you back into the ventral vagal state, social engagement, when you get triggered. Remember, we can't think our way out of a trauma response because the prefrontal cortex is offline. So we can't start with cognitive strategies like thought restructuring. We have to start with the body. This is called bottom-up regulation. We need to send signals of safety to our reptilian brain. Here are two of the most powerful tools. Tool 1, the orienting response. When animals in the wild escape a predator, the first thing they do is scan their environment to make sure the threat is truly gone. We have the same reflex. When you feel triggered, pause. Let your eyes slowly wander around the room. Don't look for anything specific. Notice colors, shapes, textures. If you want, name 5 objects you see. This simple action forces your prefrontal cortex online and sends a powerful signal to your amygdala that says, the danger is past. You are in the present and you are safe. Tool 2, the physiological sigh. This is the fastest way to regulate your nervous system in real time. It's extensively researched by Dr. Andrew Huberman at Stanford. It works like this. Take 2 consecutive inhales through the nose, one deep inhale, then a shorter one at the top, followed by a full, slow exhale through the mouth. Let's try it now. Inhale, inhale more, then exhale completely. This sigh activates the parasympathetic nervous system, your body's braking system, and immediately reduces your heart rate and blood pressure. Use it anytime you feel stressed or overwhelmed. Alex started using these tools. Before walking into a meeting, Alex does a few physiological sighs. During the meeting, if they feel activated, Alex takes a moment to orient themselves in the room. Gradually, Alex noticed they could stay more engaged and less reactive.
The final phase is about expanding your window of tolerance. The window of tolerance is the range of emotions you can handle without flipping into chaos or numbness. Trauma narrows this window. To expand it, we need to gradually expose ourselves to uncomfortable sensations in a safe, controlled way. This process is called titration and pendulation. Titration means just touching the edge of the activation, feeling a little bit of the stress or difficult emotion, and then coming back to safety. Pendulation is the rhythmic movement back and forth between the state of stress and the state of resource. You can practice this by noticing a slightly uncomfortable sensation in your body for a few seconds, and then consciously shifting your attention to a pleasant or neutral sensation, like the feeling of your feet on the floor or the warmth in your palms. By moving back and forth, you are teaching your nervous system that it can experience stress without becoming overwhelmed. But there is another crucial part of the upgrade. We cannot just focus on eliminating triggers. We must also actively cultivate glimmers. Glimmers is a term coined by Deb Dana, an expert in polyvagal theory. They are the opposite of triggers. They are micro moments of joy, safety, connection, or peace. It could be the warmth of your morning coffee cup, a text from a friend, noticing a tree outside your window, or the feeling of comfort in your chair. The trauma operating system is wired to look for threats, so we have to consciously and deliberately look for glimmers. By focusing on these micro moments of safety, we are gradually shifting the brain's negativity bias and strengthening our ventral vagal state. For Alex, this meant not just managing their anxiety, but actively acknowledging the moments when they felt supported by a colleague or proud of their work. This process takes time. It's not a quick fix, but every time you practice these tools, you are laying down a new brick for a stronger, more flexible neural foundation. You are upgrading your operating system.
The past never disappears completely. The memories, the sensations, they are part of your story, but they do not have to be the blueprint for your future. The journey we've taken today is about moving from shame to clarity, from feeling broken to understanding that you adapted. You are not weak, you are not crazy, you are not damaged beyond repair. You are a human being with a complex, magnificent nervous system that did its best to protect you under difficult circumstances. Your trauma operating system is a testament to your strength and resilience. But now it's time to thank it for its service and start installing the updates. You now have the knowledge. You understand that trauma lives in the body. You understand the polyvagal ladder, the survival responses, and the importance of bottom-up regulation. And more importantly, you have the tools, the orienting response, the physiological sigh, the search for glimmers. This is not just information, it is an invitation to start a new relationship with yourself. A relationship built on understanding, compassion, and patience. This work is not easy, but it is the most important work you will ever do. Because when you heal your trauma, you don't just change your own life, you change the lives of those around you, and you break the cycle for future generations. The blueprint is in your hands. It's time to start building. Thank you for watching Psych Blueprint. If this video was valuable to you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And if you feel comfortable, share in the comments below one glimmer you noticed today. We'd love to hear from you. See you in the next video.